Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. So today we are going to present our invention, which is Newton's map. Let the adventure begin. Newton's map, Let the Adventure Begin project is essential as a tool to support learning experience inside or outside of educational institutions. It will help teachers and parents to teach physics in an enjoyable way that will capture students' heart to learn physics even more. The mix of knowledge and also fun elements in the board game will enhance students' interest and improve their critical thinking. The students will not only likely to get the knowledge, but they can also brush up their communication skills by interacting with their group member, teacher, and also enhancing the IQ and EQ of the scholars. Of this case study is to determine if game-based learning has a positive effect on high school students in terms of students' performance and motivations in the form of group board game consists of 4 to 6 players aged between 16 to 17 years old. Second one is to identify whether game board learning can help to understand physics education in controlled and measurable movement. Is to help students to differentiate between the learning goal and the game goal, and considering how the learning goals are implemented in the game enhances possibility of useful evaluations of learning.
Now it's my turn to explain the method of playing this board game. This research is focused for 16 to 17 years old students and was cooperated for a group of 40 students from 4 science stream classes that are divided into experiment and control group with the same amount of male and female in each group. Each group was taught with the same teacher during the learning classes. Before experiment started, both of the group have learned Chapter 4 Newton's Law of Universal Gravitation by only reading a textbook. Then, both of group will take a pre-assessment. After finishing their test, experimental group will play board game while control group will continue with the traditional classes. They will take another test to observe which method is more effective in order to understand this chapter. Each group has 4 players, and each individual is recommended to answer quiz and quiz question and also cooperate in charade and experiment activity. Each player chooses the token, and one player from each group will start the game after throwing the dice and move based on the number that he or she gets. Each stage has different activities, so the participant need to pick one card based on the stage that he or she gets and answer the question or play the game. Player who get the right answer will proceed to the next stage and wait for her or his turn. If the participant cannot get the right answer or finish the activity, the player must stay at the same stage and answer on the next round. Which group finish the game first is the winner, and the expectation for game lasts approximately 2 hours. Based on this board game, yellow, orange, and peach stages represent easy, moderate, and hard levels accordingly. This is an activity card that they need to pick based on the stages that they get. After all players finish the game, they will take the other test. The test was prepared in usual written form and covered Chapter 4 Newton's Law of Universal Gravitation. The score for this test will show either this method is success or not.
This is the result and analysis part. The success of this game as a learning instrument was evaluated in a classroom setting. All students were required to take pre-assessment. After a brief review of the correct answer, the game was presented to the experimental group, and the control group proceeded with the standard classes. It lasted for 2 hours, and a boss test was given to both groups. The participants in the experimental group were actively engaged in their team and cooperate well together. Some groups' reaction to the competitive environment was interesting. Where they tracked the performance of other players and established an interest to find and think for the correct answer quickly. In the meantime, there were groups who enjoyed the games in a calmer atmosphere
concentrating only on the game. They tended to discuss the answers together. The score gained when comparing to the pre-assessment and post-test for each group will determine whether game board learning has helped them to understand physics education. You found that more number of teams in the experimental group which uses board game have higher score of game. And larger improvement in the post-test mark compared to the control group were learned traditionally. All 5 teams in the experimental group showed a greater mark improvement, leading to a higher score of game. Conversely, only one of the 5 teams in the control groups had a higher score of game, while the other 4 teams had only slight improvement, leading to a minimal score of game. Next, let us go to the discussion part. The main aim of this study was to examine the effect of using board game in measuring the accomplishment of students by comparing to their pre-assessment and post-test marks of experimental group and also control group. Based on our observation, the main reason why experimental group which uses board game has higher score of game is because participants are actively involved in their group as they work together on something they understand and practice together to carry out a simple experiment that is required in the board game until it has been successful. By answering quizzes, they must first know the basic knowledge of Newton's law of universal gravitation and try to answer the question which will challenge their theory and memorization. Using this way, they actually can apply their knowledge rather than only reciting the information. This is crucial in producing more students with high creative thinking. The structure of this game is strong enough to support the generation of certain kinds of post-test questions. For example, quiz is based on multiple choice questions which similar to paper 1 of the test. Quizzes stage in the board game is in the form of subjective questions which similar to paper 2. Lastly, the simple experiment can add extra understanding for the student to answer paper 3, which is the writing of experiment report of their syllabus. However, there are some weaknesses in our study, which is the topic that is being used. Newton's law of universal gravitation is a very simple subject. Another drawback of our project is the lack of consideration for the unequal treatment that might happen during the analysis by the teacher who could only focusing on the experimental team and disregarding control groups which could impact the outcome of post-test.
The improvement in the normalized benefit between the participant pre-assessment and post-test scores shows that the technique used, which is gamification, may have been the contributing factor compared to the students who learn in the traditional way. This paper studied the influence of board games as an assessment method on students' achievement. Students from experimental groups of board games perform better than students in traditional class. It implies that assessing students' achievement in the form of a game may improve their performance and short-term achievements.
However, there are some issues in our study that need to be improved in the future. Firstly, the topic that is being used, which is Newton's law of universal gravitation, is a very simple subject. Therefore, future studies can examine the usage of board game to implement the cultivate complex subject in the field of physics using another population, for example, university students.
And more systematic review could be conducted to explore the operational concept of game-based learning, which is GBL. more studies should be carried out to see how game-based learning, which is GBL, and gamification implementation in science classroom affect students' attitudes, motivation, and thinking skills.